Hi everyone. Have you ever wanted to improvise a canon? This might sound like a Herculean task, but I'm going to show you 3 simple techniques to get started. So let's jump right in. The first one is the round, also known as a perpetual canon. And this is because you can loop this melody as many times as you like and it still works out. So here I have a tune called Ah Poor Bird, and we're going to play it as a round. I'll start with the right hand and join one bar later with the left hand. Now, one of the reasons why this works so well is because we can harmonize each bar the same way. So the first bar we have 151 as a possible harmonization, but we can use that for the second bar as well, and the third, and the fourth. So every bar can be harmonized using 151, and we can now juxtapose all of these bars together to give us what I call the generating progression. So we have something like this. So at any given point, when you have, let's say, 3 or 4 voices joining, you'll hear something like this. And so we can analyze the generating progression as 151 as well. Um, let's, let's call it 57 actually. There's a G in there. And all of these notes are part of the 5/7. You could also call this a 7 diminished 6 if you like. But here we have our generating progression. So I can generate the first bar by starting with the D, and then go up to E, and then go to F. And then the second bar, I can go from F to G to A. So I'm taking a different path. And then the third bar, I can just follow the soprano line. And then the fourth bar, I can do F, E, and then back down to D. Yet another path. So each time I'm taking a different path, and that also makes sure that I don't have parallel octaves or fifths like that. So that's how that works. Here's another example, the famous Tallis canon. And this one has a generating progression that uses, let's see, 1, I call it 2, 7, 5, 7, 1. You can call it 7 diminished if you like. And I'm not going to worry too much about the inversion symbols because any of the notes in these chords can take a turn being in the bass position. So let me play this one as well. I almost forgot that tail there. Okay, so we can use that idea to create our own canon, our own round, and let's use a simple 5/1 or 5/7/1 in the key of C. Oops, use big one there. Um, so let's use this as our generating progression. And I'm just going to start with maybe 2 bars. Let's say I start with G and then go to C. Let's start with G and then go to C. And then maybe for my second round, I do D and E. Oh, I should say the second path. Okay, so I would just practice the first 2 bars as a round, and so on. And then once you're comfortable with that, you can add another bar. Let's say for our third path, we'll take uh, B and C. So B going up to C, and then maybe G, and then we stay on G, and then F down to E, and then D down to C. And we'll end it there. Okay, so we have something like this. And so that's the first 3 bars, and you can loop that as well. Once you feel comfortable, keep adding one more bar at a time. And then you can decorate each of these bars and then transfer those decorations or elaborations to the following voice. So for example, if I do that in my leading voice, I can do the same thing in the following voice. Or something similar, something along those lines. Um, you just have to remember what you did in the previous bar. So the round works very well in terms of a practice tool because you can loop not just the whole melody, but you can loop a fragment of it. You can loop the first 2 bars or the next 2 bars or whatever, and that's a really good way to practice and help remember what you did in the previous bars. So that's the round. I want to show you another technique, and this one involves scales and arpeggios. So if you've played scales in thirds or sixths, you've already played a canon. Here's how it works. So instead of having a 1 bar delay, scales and arpeggios, let's talk about scales. There's a 2-beat delay, or 2-note delay for scales. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's say I start with the right hand, and then I join with the left hand. So I now have a scale in thirds, effectively. I can also go down. That gives me a scale in sixths. And you can just go up and down as you please. Okay, so that works really nicely. You just need to remember to keep a 2-beat distance between the leading and following voices. And now for arpeggios, you only really need a 1-beat difference. You could have 2 or even more, but it doesn't really matter because if you have an arpeggio, all the notes will fit inside the same chord. So let's just do one for now. And in all of the examples that I've demonstrated so far, I've used the right hand first and then the left hand, but you could also do it the other way. And actually, it's good to practice left hand first and then right hand as well, just to keep things even. So now, what you can do is to combine scales and arpeggios together. So let's say you have an arpeggio first, and then maybe you do a scale, and then you could do another arpeggio and another scale. So maybe you could do something like this. Something like that. So let me show you an example. Here's Schumann's symphonic etudes. This is the 4th etude from that. And he has a 2-beat distance in this example. So you can use arpeggios and scales without any problem. So this is what he does. Yeah, so we have an arpeggio in the first bar, and then we have scales And then we have arpeggio again. And you could call this scales, I guess. And then you have arpeggios, uh, and then you have a scale, and so on. Okay, so he's mixing and matching scales and arpeggios. And so the rule to abide by is two beats for scales and one beat for arpeggios. And that should work. Another really good example is Mozart's sonata in D major, K576. So the second theme of that actually has this kind of canon. So that's scales and arpeggios. Let's try a third technique. So this is going to be sequences. And unlike the other two that I've shown you, this one moves more harmonically. So whereas the round, for example, you use the same chord progression over and over and over again, sequences allow you more flexibility in terms of the harmony. And so for this one, we're actually going to imitate at a fifth below. Um, I've discovered that this is probably the easiest way to control sequences. There are other types of sequences and other intervals for the imitation that you can use, but in my opinion, the fifth below is the easiest to work with. So I have an A2 sequence in the first bar here. A2 just means ascending by second, using Late's terminology. So, and you can keep going forever and ever if you want. You can also go down. So the intervals are not necessarily the same going up or going down. And you know, the reason is because only certain intervals are allowed to be used when you're imitating at certain intervals. But once you know what they are and get a feel for these patterns, you can use them and combine them however you like. So you can combine the A2 with the D2 if you like. But let's start with the A2 now, going up, and we can decorate the sequence very simply. Let's try putting a passing tone um, between the third. Okay, and going down. And so on. Or you could try something like this. Turn that into a sequential canon. Um, so let's combine the A2 and D2 with various types of elaborations, and let's see what we can come up with. Okay, and I didn't put any elaborations at the end. Um, and if you make a mistake, that's okay. Just catch the next one and try to remember what you did before. I don't think I did that one perfectly either, but I kept the sequence going. So that's the idea for sequences. And let me just show you an example that uses sequences. This comes from Buxtehude's Prelude, Fugue, and Chaconne in C major. And this part uses an A2 sequence. So these are the three techniques that I wanted to show you. So try them out for yourself and let me know what you think and share with us your experience. and I'd love to hear your feedback. So thanks for tuning into this video, and see you in the next one.